It's time for my very first food forest tour on our new site. I'm Liz Zorab and this is Byther Farm. This plot is 0.56 of an acre, so just over half an acre, and right now this feels like an enormous space to start filling. And so what I did a couple of weeks ago was to lay down some weed suppressing membrane, that's the cornstarch one, put some wood chips on top of that, and now I'm planting, moving the wood chips out of the way, folding the membrane back a little bit and planting into the ground, and quietly working my way across this area. I have created a planting plan which is on my website, and I'll leave a link to that on the screen and in the video description. And as I put new plants in each day, I will update that plan so you can see exactly what I've got, where, which varieties, and wherever possible I'll put links for them to you to be able to find them online. This is a north facing plot, so north is at the bottom of the slope there, south is up behind me, and so I need to think a bit carefully as I'm planting about anything very tall here will cast a shadow on the thing next to it for a period during each day. And so I've been fairly careful that the tallest and the most solid plants in a row are at the ends, or the things that go next to a tall plant are things that are happy to be in the shade, at least for part of the day. So we've got a lilac here. I've got no idea what variety is because it was given to me as a gift. I'm absolutely delighted. When I got it, it was about 4 inches tall, so it's grown a couple of years in a pot and is now looking very healthy and happy. This little plant, I'm reliably informed by its label, is Iris pallida argentea variegata. I recall it having a pale mauve flower, pale lilac-y purple flower, very nice variegated leaves. Bought that online from a very well-known auction site. This is one of the very many peonies that I brought from our old home. I don't know which variety it is, and until next year when it flowers, I'll just have to guess. So I'm looking forward to finding out about that. And here are some irises. Again, we were given these. I don't know what colour they are, but I suspect they're yellow. They were in a pot. I divided them into 4 pieces, separated them out, and have replanted them in two patches here. And a lot of the plants that will go eventually into the cut flower garden are starting off in here this year. And that's purely because this is the only area that I've put rabbit-proof fencing around so far. And so for the first season, everything's being planted in here. And it will sit here until I've made another area rabbit-proof and I can slowly start transferring things over. But in the meantime, they're growing, they're developing bigger root systems, they're expanding in size, so that when I do move them, hopefully I'll have larger clumps to divide to fill a bigger space. So this is a Japanese anemone. I was given this by a new friend, Amanda, so thank you, Amanda. She gave me a couple of anemones, but an awful lot of perennial geraniums and things like Alchemilla mollis, which are great for ground cover and also great for flower arranging. And behind me here is a rhubarb. Now this is going to be staying in the food forest. This variety is Timperley Early. It's one of my favourites. In Monmouthshire we started harvesting it late February, early March. It'll be interesting next spring to find out when I can start harvesting this, now that we're somewhere that's a higher elevation and a little bit further north. And this absolutely beautiful Japanese anemone has a double flower. It attracts the bees and other pollinators like nobody's business. Brought this with me from our home in Monmouthshire, and again I've divided it, put a smaller piece there and some very tiny pieces down here for them to grow on as time goes on. I've already been accompanied by a hoverfly this morning. Good morning, hoverfly. And I'm excited to have these in here. I'm pleased to have something that's bright and colourful and cheery, and it's attracting pollinators so soon after we've moved in. And then as I go up the hill, there's a currant bush. There are lots of things in pots here waiting to go in, but they're not necessarily going to go in here, so I'll wait before I tell you about those. Likewise, there is the debris of my planting. I will be coming through in the next few days, picking up all the empty pots because I want to use a lot of them for propagating. There is still time to take cuttings of roses, and if you don't know how I do that, I'll leave a link in the video description. And it's also a really good time to be taking cuttings of fruit bushes like currants and gooseberries and all of their various different crosses. So I will be using lots of these pots with quite a depth to them, because that allows plenty of roots to grow ready for planting out next year. So I'm still working my way up the hill. Here's a lemon balm, and this originally came from Mr. J's mother. It was in her garden. I asked her if I could have a piece of it. She gave me some cuttings, and I'm very pleased to say we've got plenty of it now. Lemon balm is really good for making infusions to drink. It's also good for drying to use in potpourri. And these daylilies come from a much larger clump which I brought with us. It was in a tray like this, so this was absolutely filled with daylilies. I've divided them and I've put 3 pieces there. This one is going to go over in another row, but it's just sitting around waiting for me to do something with it. And again, a lot of these will get moved over into the cut flower garden, but some parts of daylilies are edible. We haven't tried them, so I can't tell you what it tastes like or what you do with them. But if you do your research online, you will be able to find out which daylilies and which parts of those daylilies you can eat. And here, I'm very pleased to say, is the first of our new apple trees. So this is a variety called Byther. It's on an MM106 rootstock, which means it's not going to get really huge and cast a lot of shadow on the plants behind it. It's going to be a few years before we see any apples on it. It's a 1-year-old grafted tree, and I'm just very excited to have some Welsh variety apples in our garden. And over here at the top of this row is a cordyline. It almost adds a sort of tropical feel to this part of the food forest. I really like them. This is a structural piece. I don't think any part of this is edible, although happy to be wrong. I was given several cordyline by a local resident from our old home, and we've brought them with us. 2 are in the ground. I've still got 2 more to go in. I've got them in some really big pots because they're one of the few plants I don't want to have to lift again. So those 2 that are in pots will stay in pots to go into the cut flower garden in the future. And then moving across, here is our domed fruit frame, which we've taken down and put up in various different places. I've brought it here because the soil here is so much better than in what I thought was going to be the veg garden, and I have now made the decision that I'm going to grow all of our home vegetables in the food forest. So there will be some annual beds in here because the soil is great, the drainage is pretty good, and it's not in what Mr. J has called a horsefly alley. So there are fewer horseflies in this area, or possibly it's just that time of year that there are fewer. But anyway, I've made the decision. We're going to be growing some annuals here. So I started out by putting in 5 long beds to plant in, and they were 10 metres apart. and I've now put in some intermediate, I've earmarked intermediates, which now makes them about 5 metres apart, and it's these intermediate ones that I will use for annual vegetables, and I might put in some perennial fruit and veg too, so there will be strawberries and rhubarb, as well as asparagus and kales, and they'll be planted side by side with our beans and the carrots and everything else we want to grow, so that this will be the food forest and our home vegetable garden. Here at the bottom of row 2 is a sweet bay, so this is for use in the kitchen. I love using bay, fresh or dried, and in fact I find the dried leaves, the flavour is much more intense. I bought this, it's one of a pair that I bought, thinking I would have them in big pots on each side of the front door in our new home. And then it turns out that wasn't going to work, each side of the front door in our new home. So they are coming into the food forest. Very pleased to have got at least one of them into the ground. There's some comfrey here, and most of the comfrey, and I brought quite a lot with me, will be going in along the edge of the fence. It will effectively be part of the hedge when that is put in. And here, well, in here I grew something, and I can't remember what I put in here, and then the rabbits nibbled it. There is a very sad little squash plant of some sort. That's not going to do anything this year, but I'm just letting it do its thing. And I can see there is a buttercup coming up through. I wish I could remember what it is. So I'm going to give this nibbled plant a chance to grow, and if it doesn't, then I'll replace it. And just here is another currant. Now I think that this is a red currant. I have nothing to guide me. I didn't label the pot, or if I did, the label has disappeared. So we'll just have to wait and see what that one is. So I'm not going to prune it until I actually know what sort of currant it is. And so here's the next apple tree. I'm going to be mispronouncing these, so if you are Welsh, please excuse me for butchering this language. I think it's Gethiawa. Again, it's on MM106, so it's not going to get huge. It'll get quite tall, but it's not going to get enormous. And I think that in this area, that's the better option. And down here is some feverfew. Oh, let's move this out of the way. And then you can see, here it is, again, eaten by the rabbits, but it's coming back. That was given to me by Adam and Arth. So thank you for those, Adam. Really, really pleased to have those feverfew. And along here is one of my favourite plants. There are so many favourites. Have you noticed that? This is Lycisteria formosa, the pheasantberry plant. It's also called the Himalayan honeysuckle. It has lots and lots of different names, and it will form a really huge clump bush of arching stems with deep burgundy bracts, tiny white flowers that then produce a very, very dark edible berry. Now, have we eaten it yet? Yes, actually I think I've used some in wine, but I haven't just eaten them. And like all new berries, the suggestion is that you just try a few, try them cooked first, make sure that your stomach is okay with them before you then eat a whole lot of them and find you've got an upset stomach. But anyway, rabbits ate that. It was about this tall. They took it down to just a few inches, but I can see now it's just getting some new leaves, so it has survived the rabbit onslaught. It's just going to take a little bit longer to get back to its glory again. And then there's some more things in pots, again waiting for me to decide where they'll go. And up here is a honeyberry. This is a rooted cutting. I took the cutting from one of our larger plants last year. It's grown on, and I'm very pleased with its progress. Again, the rabbits have had their fair share, but now they can't get in. Hopefully this will flourish. And I've noticed also growing there is a very small lemon balm, and I probably need to take that out because it will grow really big, and maybe I'll just lift it and move it over there a little bit. Here's a chive plant waiting to be divided up and going in, but it's not in yet. The row in between 2 and 3, which will be called 2A, I've just marked where it's going to be, but I haven't put anything in there yet. So let's return to row 3. I've got a row in here which we brought with us. And when I planted this in Monmouthshire, it was about this high and as thin as one of these little branches, which is literally just this little whip. So in 5 years, it's done this, and it's coped with being in a pot for almost a year. I'm really pleased it seems to have survived the transplant. Here is our very sad honeyberry. We had it around the back of one of the barns. Didn't water it in the time between bringing it and actually moving in, and then even then I forgot about it for quite some time. Rabbits got to the lower levels and nibbled at those, but I'm quite convinced it's alive and well because there's fresh growth on the ends of each stem and the little branches. There are some parts that are crispier than others. I think you can hear that's not very good, but my hope is it will spring back up next year. It will have had a few months to settle in and will grow very well next year. So let's carry on up a bit. This apple tree is a Worcester pearmain. It's on M26 rootstock, so I'll be able to maintain it to quite a low level. And I was even wondering the other day whether I could train these branches little by little to make a semi-espalier tree. Still have yet to think about that. Down here is a sweet Sicily. Now I love sweet Sicily plants. The smell is just delightful, and I use them when I'm cooking rhubarb. The aniseed flavour from sweet Sicily helps to counteract the very acidic tartness of rhubarb. It just smells lovely. Here is a lovage. Now I'm not going to touch this lovage. I really like to use lovage in soups and stews and in stocks. It is another big architectural plant in the same family as Angelica. It has these very big lovely leaves and these very tall flowers. The umbilical family of flowers, so they look like an umbrella but upside down with lots of little flowers on the top of it. Really good for pollinators. But I find that the smell of the leaves stays on my hands for a very long time. So when I'm gathering lovage, I always wear gloves. I've put a little currant in there. Again, I don't know what sort it is. I'll have to wait for next year to find out. And there's the first of many Nepeta plants here. Absolutely love that catmint. It's minty, it's florally smell. The bees and other pollinators love their flowers, and the foliage is really good for using in potpourri. Here's a very tiny hazel tree, grown from a seed, a nut. It'll take a few years to grow into a decent size, but very pleased to have that in the garden. There's a couple of clumps of chives, they're still very small. Again, the rabbits have been at them, but they're coming back. And then here is another Lysosteria formosa. Because it's kind of quite light and airy, it's not going to cast too much of a shadow on the plants lower down. One of the things about this field is that it is very moist here. It's a very damp area. There are always lots and lots of midges around, not helped by our grass being reasonably long. As yet, we still don't have a lawnmower. Well, we've got a small push-along one, and I've got a very small electric one, which would do a suburban front garden very well. I'd have trouble getting an electric cable down this far, and it only cuts about 12 inches at a time, and it would take an awfully long time to do this grass. So I'm leaving the grass as it is until we have got a suitable mower, and then we'll tackle it. But it's been really interesting to see which wildflowers are appearing in the grass, and some that I haven't known before. So the yellow one that's appeared a lot over there is called hawkbit. It's also called the autumn dandelion. As one flush of flowers dies off, another one appears, and we've just had this constant display of beautiful bright yellow flowers in the grass. It's really very nice. Rows 4, 5 and onwards are longer than the first 3 because I've left a space at that end to put a polytunnel at a later date. Again, these rows will have something in between the centre of them with annuals and perennials for home veg consumption. And let's have a quick look at what we've got here. So I've put in some ground cover like Alchemilla mollis and perennial geranium and the Peter. Here is what I'm fairly sure is a white currant, but it could be a red currant. And here is the next of the Welsh apple varieties. I don't even know how to say this name, so I'm going to guess at Puggerworth. I'll put the name on the screen. And once again, this is on MM106 rootstock. Doesn't this look lovely? I'm so excited. I'm so excited about having these Welsh varieties. Some more Nepeta, and there are spaces waiting for more trees to go in. Here are some more of those trees, but as yet I haven't quite got those into the ground. And this rather sad looking plant is a Taunton Dean kale. It's one that we brought with us, taken from a cutting. I've got to say, every single time I walk past it, I pick off a caterpillar. You can join your friend there. And I thought I'd got all the caterpillars, but evidently not. So the rabbits did have a go at this, but it survived. My hope with this one was to grow it almost like a tree, so to have quite a sturdy stem or almost a trunk, and then let it grow a kind of a head of leaves above it. And here's another lovage. Again, not going to touch it without gloves. It's just a personal preference. There's nothing wrong with it. I just don't like the smell on my hands. Once Mr. J and I had made the decision to move home, I started acquiring plants, and this is one of them. It's Gallagher. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I will put the name on the screen. This has been really pretty. So it's part of the legume family. We'll fix some nitrogen. It's got masses of little seed pods on it, so I'm hoping either I can come and collect those and grow some more from seed, or it will self-seed around it. There's a lupin here. I brought this one with me from our previous home. I bought these via a local Facebook gardening group there. I spent 50 pence per lupin. I bought about a dozen of them. I'm really pleased that they've all survived, even from the rabbits, so they're going into the ground. And just here is another apple. See if this is one I can pronounce. Yes, this is it's Machen, M-A-C-H-E-N, and again on the MM106 rootstock. Oh, that little leaf needs rescuing. We have bought plenty of tree stakes, and one of our jobs over the next few days is to get stakes in for these young plants, because whilst it's not very windy now, it won't be very long before it is. There are 2 Lysimachia here. That's a yellow loosestrife. It's a variegated version. I really like it, and self-sown in there is also some self-heal. Self-heal has a lovely little purple flower. Seeds itself absolutely everywhere, but in that food forest situation, that's absolutely fine. And at the end here, I am very pleased to say, is a homegrown cherry. I have no idea whether it's an edible cherry, a flowering cherry, a bird cherry, but I found it as a tiny seedling in our old home, potted it up. It's been growing on for the last year. That's looking really happy and healthy. And whether it's a tall a floral one or one of the wide ones that produce masses of flowers, masses of cherries, whatever it is, I'm very happy to have it. And then moving in this direction a bit more, there are definitely some rows that I've planted more in than others. and this is row 5, and this has got quite a lot in it. So there's a penstemon there. I love penstemons. I just love them for their flowers, and this will end up in the cut flower garden, but it's living here for now. It's already done one full flush of flowers. I've cut those off. It's just starting to get some new flowers now. Penstemon, you just leave the growth on over winter because it helps protect the crown, and then when you see new growth coming next year, then you can cut it back, or you can do what I do very often, which is just to leave it, and then you get a larger, slightly more straggly plant. And this is a little birch tree. Eventually this is going to grow as tall and hopefully as lovely as the one in the patron's garden in Monmouthshire. Mr. J and I are really fond of birch trees. I like the sound that the wind makes as it moves through the leaves in a birch tree, but it's got a bit of growing to do yet. What I do know is that the tree in Monmouthshire was slightly smaller than this when I planted it, and within 5 years it had grown to this incredibly beautiful tree. So hopefully it won't be too long before that one gets going too. This is a hellebore foetidus, has little green flowers. I really like the simplicity of it, so I'm looking forward to propagating more of those in the next couple of years. This is another of the small lupins, and let's move this out of the way a bit. And then this is a Persicaria Bistorta officinalis. I think that's how it's said. Anyway, what it is a plant that came from my parents' home. So if you haven't read my book Grounded, you won't know this story, but when my parents' house was sold, the lady who bought it, Lucy, came to visit me, and I asked her if she'd mind bringing me a few offsets or cuttings of plants that were in my parents' garden. She very kindly bought us this. I grew it on in Monmouthshire. I lifted it and brought it with me. I've been able to divide it, so I'm going to have several pieces of this in the garden. This will go into the cut flower garden, but right now I want to look after it here. And then next to it is a tiny little pink geranium. Hopefully that will also grow and provide some ground cover. And then continuing up this row, a Szechuan pepper. It's a 2-year-old plant. Some echinacea, which is a really lovely pinky purple. Some ground cover in the form of Alchemilla mollis. And then this is a white currant. It has seen better days. And then this tree is called Channel Beauty. I can definitely say that without a problem. And at the end is another rowan. And then there's just one more tree to talk about, and that's over there, and that's a mulberry. So I planted this mulberry tree about a month ago, and I'm really worried about it. So I don't know why that mulberry has gone so pale and dry. It would imply it hasn't had enough water, so we're going to keep an eye on it and just keep our fingers crossed that we'll get over the shock of being planted. I still have all of these plants to move through to the food forest and to get into the ground. There's a huge number of them and it's going to take a little bit of time, but that's okay. There's plenty of time before the first frost. And so wherever you are in the world and whatever you've got planned for today, I hope it's a good one, and I also hope you'll join me again next time. Do you want to go down? Yes.